So we're doing another Q&A today, and as always with these, we'll address some hate comments at the end, make it a bit spicy, but this one is a bit more special than the others because it's in celebration of reaching 10,000 subscribers, something I am very much appreciative of each and every one of you, especially my loyal members, for helping me get to this point, supporting me, watching my videos, sharing them, however you help, just watching is enough. I appreciate that to the moon. This is something that when I started my channel, had 0 subscribers. For the longest time, I would post videos and get like 5, 6 views, 10 views for like a month or even 2. And I never knew if it was something I could do, but I knew it was something that I wanted to. And as the channel exceedingly grows and I see how supportive these people are and perceptive and people receptive, I guess is the word I mean, of my ideas, it shows me that this is something that I can do. And as someone who's always struggled socially with anxieties and doubts and, not to bog this down with that kind of stuff, I really do appreciate that. So thank you guys very much. Starting off, we have Good Karma 2023. They are a member. That is always much appreciated. They are a constant commenter, constant viewer, and for that, thank you to the moon. They asked, "Hi Brandon, early congrats on reaching 10,000 subscribers." Thank you. Only possible because of the likes of you. My question is, in one of your videos, you mentioned that early on, you supported or agreed with communism. What aspect of communism appealed to you? Thanks. So in large, I still agree with many of the aspects of communism. Like I say all the time, socialism is an ideology and communism is a vehicle in which that ideology can be put into real life or real means. It is not the only way that it can be placed though. And when I first started learning about politics, I knew kind of like the end, not really the ins and out, but just kind of had an idea. And I knew that socialist kind of tendencies were what I would lean towards. So when you search those things out, obviously the first thing you come across is Karl Marx, Marxism. This is why a lot of people conflate all of socialism with Marxism. What appealed to me about it was the way that it would do away with wealth inequality, the way it promoted more of an equal floor, where you have to think in capitalism, your ceiling and your floor, like what you can achieve and where you start, are both defined by how much money you have, while the goal of socialism, communism is to create a baseline floor for everyone. And what people mistake is they think it creates a ceiling for everyone, but it doesn't really. Communism kind of, but socialism, no, it's about creating an equal floor for everyone and then going as high as you can, rather than, again, in capitalism, how much money you're born into decides your floor, and then how much money you create or generate decides your ceiling. And I just don't think that's fair or the way life should be. I don't think it should be the goals. Like, you have to have more goals than being a landlord and a billionaire. Like, I'm just saying, if owning private property is your biggest achievement in life, I worry about you a little bit. So what appealed to me at first was that, the way that did it. And I think the better question is kind of how I strayed away from just communism. And what it is well, first off, the biggest thing is the fact that communism will never be applied in America. Like, it would never work. Communal ownership of the means of production, with how enthralled individualism and private property and personal property are ingrained into American society, communism could never work here. And with communism, I'll describe the differences really quick, right? In capitalism, you have private property and you have public property and you have personal property, right? And private property is property that, and I'm going to define these through communist definitions, through Marx definitions, right? Private property is property that is owned privately by the individual to profit off of. Personal property is property that's owned by the individual, but it's just for their recreational use, like your phone, your car, while private property would be like your house, that you're going to sell, or your business, things like that. And then you have public property, which is paid for by the community for the community, like parks, libraries, police, roads, things like that. In communism, they want to take private property and personal property and make all of that public property, right? If you have 2 cows and your neighbor down the road doesn't have any milk, you then need to loan the milk from your cow to that person. Socialism, the difference is personal property still exists along with public property. It's just doing away with private property to where that public property is those who are affected by it thus have a say in it. So if you're working in a business, you're not just getting paid $7.25, even though you're making the business $1,000 in profits, like at McDonald's or whatever. You're selling 100 hamburgers in an hour, you're making them $500, whatever, you're getting paid $7.25, right? Socialism would entail you're bringing this company this amount of profit, thus you should be entailed to the percent of which your labor creates that amount of profit, right? So like and again, I would have to go down to 20-minute spiel to break it all down, but that's kind of like the basis. So the first thing that brought me away from communism was the fact that it could just never work in America. So you'd have to think of something else. Second is a core facet of communism is the overthrowing of the government with a vanguard class. What a vanguard class is it is the most politically or intelligently inclined, most politically inclined or most intelligent members of the working class would create kind of this vanguard class, which would work as the government. And to do that, you have to overthrow the current government and the vanguard would be put in place. Just think of it like instead of Congress, the Senate, the House, these people getting paid hundreds of $1,000s an hour, a year to do that, it would be people who work in the community but are just more politically inclined. And again, it's just something that is just never going to be applied in America. So that's kind of what strayed me away from it. The more I learned about politics, the ins and outs of American democracy and the actual problems with it, where growing up, I was always rebellious. So like another thing that appealed to me with communism was I was really rebellious, right? Like I was like, I'm anti-government, I'm anti-authority, I'm anti all these things. So the appeal of like overthrowing them and drastically making these changes was like, yeah, like I'm rebellious enough for that. Like that sounds like me. But the more I learned that like a lot of the problems with our government are self-inflicted, like Citizens United, the ruling that allows money into politics. If we did away with that, it would put a lot less influence of these corporations into politics. If we had term limits on the Supreme Court and they weren't allowed to just overturn these rulings because of the massive donations that they're getting, it would take that away. If we didn't have the Electoral College to where the person that the most Americans vote for doesn't always become the president, like our wishes aren't really being met in that way, then that would do away with that problem. So I became a little more, I call it lib-pilled, because like my real like true socialist friends think, they call me a liberal. Like in my sphere, that's an insult, right? But then if I get with liberals and I start talking about how like housing should be like for all, tax based and funded for all, healthcare should be funded for all, I get called like a communist. So I'm like somewhere in the middle, but I was like lib-pilled by the fact that I do trust in democracy very much so. I am a staunch believer in fixing democracy, not just saying, oh, it's a problem, so there's nothing we can do about it. So now like what kind of brought me away from it was I do trust what America is supposed to be, I guess is the best way to say it, like the American dream or what we are aiming for. I just think that we've fallen short of that drastically. And I also think that the goal for life shouldn't be so oriented towards money making and private property and all these things. And we shouldn't have millions of houses and then hundreds of thousands of homeless people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's like 38 houses, vacant houses for each homeless person. That should just not be a thing. Like, give them a fucking house, right? We shouldn't have people literally dying of starvation in the streets at the same time that corporations like McDonald's and Walmart and shit are just throwing out food because they're not selling it. Like, just give them the fucking food, We shouldn't have people who are dying of sickness because they literally can't pay for their health care. Like, just give them that health care, Like, we can afford it. We're the greatest country in the world. We're the wealthiest country in the world. So it was like the recognition of the problems in our country that income inequality and the profit motive create that appealed to me to communism. And then it was kind of the realization that democracy is the greatest system of governance, in my opinion, and that if we just applied a little bit from communism, like we took socialism and we thrusted it into democracy, and we didn't have the outside intervention that ruins a lot of other countries that try this because we want capitalism to be the global thing. So we fucking stranglehold Cuba when they're doing communism. We stranglehold Venezuela when they're doing communism, and we just do all these things and we say, look, it's communism, when really it's American intervention. I am not going to go down that tunnel, but that's kind of what led me to where I am today, from first getting into communism, then being a supporter of democracy, to now just wanting to socialize that wealth, brother. The first video we have today is from one of my most loyal members, CPND, and he asked two questions actually, or I think there might even be three that find their way on here, but the first one he asked was on the topic of disability, but leaning more towards autism. Does the US do enough for people with with disabilities. He said this might be an interview idea, and that one of his concerns is when an adult with a disability is alone with no siblings or parents to take care of them. No, the US full stop doesn't do enough for people with disabilities in this country. I have experience with this firsthand. I work in mental health. I specifically work with those on the spectrum. I worked with adults in group homes, and now I work with children. And I will say that in terms of private schools, charter schools, lots of these schools don't even offer like this services or special education because it is too much of a cost, and they're not going to turn the profit off of it they need from the equipment, from the training for teachers, for all of that. And it kind of follows into adulthood as well, where you see a lot of times families just don't really know or don't really want to, as sad as that is, to care for them. So they just push them into group homes. And the problem is that the community like the demand outweighs the supply of employees. So they're kind of, group homes especially, will just hire anyone off the streets. You'll get a lot of people in there who are just there for a paycheck, which when you're caring for people, that's the wrong attitude to have. They really don't train people the way they should. And so you get a lot of these people who are getting drastically less care than they need. They're not really being taught anything to kind of functionally push them back into society. They're not put out there to do jobs, things like that, unless they're waiver clients, which are like really high functioning and the clients with a lot of money. So no, altogether, it is a massive problem. And I wish it was something that America did dedicate more time to. His second question was a hypothetical about, since everyone who is not rich is working and doing their best, do you think we would be in another level if we used our spending on things that helped all? Like, we are already being pushed to our limit. Imagine if the cost of living wasn't so high and parents could watch their child grow and be more active in their life instead of working 2 jobs or 3. Yes, I'm a staunch supporter of tax-based funding. I think funding things through taxes from those with the need, from those with the ability to those with the need, is the way that society should operate in my eyes. I would support things like 4-day work weeks. I think if you have the ability to work, you should be working, but you shouldn't be working 70 hours to fund things that are necessary for survival. I think housing should be funded through taxes. I think everyone should put money into a pot, and those who need to take from that pot can take from that pot, while those who are able to add to it should be adding to it. And the more you can add to it, the more you should. It's just how it works. There shouldn't be this large swaths of wealth inequality that we see, when it's just pretty much a dice roll at this point of, are you going to be born into a wealthy family? Are you going to be born into an affluent neighborhood? Are you going to be born around the best schools? Are you going to be thrust into the best jobs? And it's like, you never really know. And there's not a lot that you can do if you start from this point to get yourself up to that point. The percent of people who are born into poverty and end up being in the top 1% is less than 2% of Americans. Most people don't even leave their tax bracket. The amount of children who end up out earning their parents is going down and down by the generation. So like I said, I think things like housing, I think things like school, I think things like childcare, things like transportation should all be guaranteed and should be all pulled from a pot from where those with the ability are giving and those with the need are taking. The next question comes from another member. This is Aaron535. She asked, hi, first, hey, what's up? And what is your biggest fear and what accomplishment are you most proud of? My biggest fear growing up was always sharks. I used to be, and I do still have kind of like an irrational fear of bodies of water because of sharks. I wouldn't say sharks are my biggest fear anymore. It's probably it's about an even battle between the internal fear of failure or disappointment. I get a lot of anxiety from that. But like externally, it's definitely heights. I do not mess with planes. I'm not going up on a ladder. I don't like being on tall buildings. I don't like looking at tall buildings. I'm not riding fair rides. So probably height externally and failing internally. And then she asked, what accomplishment are you most proud of? The accomplishment I'm most proud of pertains to my son. And I know that's kind of like the cop-out answer. You know, if you're a parent, you're most proud of your son, which I mean, obviously you should be. But to get more specific, my son just finished preschool, and both his preschool teacher, the kindergarten teachers, and the first grade teachers all agree that he should skip kindergarten because he's far too advanced from me reading with him every day. He knows how to just completely read by himself. He knows how to do addition really, really well, count on his fingers. He can even kind of do it off of his fingers. He can spell, he can do subtraction. So they think that he should skip kindergarten and go straight to first grade with kids who are much older than him, which that is probably the accomplishment I'm most proud of. If there was one thing I wanted to pass on to my son, it was my intelligence. The next name, it's just met, it's just me T, got that wrong last time, 1743, she asked, Please help me to understand how the plans by the Republicans and Trump do not fall under Amendment 14.3, which makes it illegal to plot to overthrow the government / destroy the Constitution. They absolutely do. That's the answer. January 6th absolutely falls under that amendment. But she goes on and she says, I cannot understand why they are not being arrested, because elites protect elites. Like, even with all the division that you see from Republicans and Democrats, you have to remember the biggest division we cannot ignore is the rich versus the poor, the elite versus the working class, and they, to some extent, will always protect their own. If there were a group of us somewhere having a manifesto as they do, wouldn't the FBI come and arrest us? Yes, unless we had $1 billion to, don't come at us that hard. You feel me? He isn't elected, and it should not matter if he was president or candidate. They have a clear plan. I want to understand why people with a roadmap on how they are going to do it and get into power are above the law. Google. The General Conspiracy Statute 18 USC 371 creates an offense if two or more persons conspire either to commit an offense against the United States or to defraud the United States or any agency thereof for any manner, for any purpose. And it's just one of those things where people can bend the meaning of words, or when it favors them, they can say, things change, like it's different now. Some of these departments have too much power. That's why we have to go after the Department of Education and the FBI, but they're not going to go after ICE. It just shows their hypocrisy and inconsistencies. And I don't necessarily have a good answer for it, because I just think that it is. And I don't think that they should have the ability to do these things. But like I said, it boils down to elites protecting elites to some level at least. Again, she comes with another question. I am needing to understand, what is the plan if Trump would win and he declares martial law? Cannot leave your house, be seen outside, or gather with anyone, send armed groups to our cities, and disrupts the ability to communicate. Isn't someone formulating a backup plan? Well, I just have to say, the last time there was a civil war and black people took up arms on the front line, the good guys won. So, I'll be right there. No, I don't really know if this happens. It's going to be crazy. The life that we know it is going to change. I think if Trump gets into office and gets to instill a lot of his Project 2025 plans, we're in for a big change, and America will never be the same. And that's why I'm trying to fight so hard before that happens, to prevent it from happening, because the best thing you can do is be proactive, and the worst thing you can do is be reactive. That's why I hate cops so much. I'm just saying. But when you react to things, it's always going to be worse. You can swell the damage, but you can't stop the damage once it happens. So I think that our best bet is to prevent it from ever happening. Yes, and I was right. CPND is back with a third question. He says, you don't have to answer this, but how do you manage work, YouTube, and life balance? Do you ever feel burnt out? I do feel burnt out, but never about YouTube. This is something that's struck a passion for me in ways that nothing else ever have. One of the reasons I started my YouTube channel is I was becoming burnt out at my actual job, whereas mostly because I like working with littles. But when you're a guy in the field that I'm in, they want you to work with the older kids, the ones who are physically more dangerous. And that's not really what I like to do my job for. So I was feeling burnt out in that regard. And the more that I see this as a real possibility and it grows and it becomes something that I'm more and more attached to, I do get burnt out with that kind of part of my life. But how I work it out is just staying on schedule, getting a strict schedule, and never breaking from it. I shoot my 3 videos all before I go to work. I pretty much do a lot. I just research, I read things, I read studies, I pull information. That's kind of what I do in my free time. If I'm not playing Pokemon or reading a book, that's what I take my time up with. So the research part is easy. I have a document with a lot of studies and things linked, but I just find kind of the topics I'm going to talk about. I script them, research for them, shoot them, and edit them all before I go to work. Then I go to work, and then I get off, and I have the rest of the day at that point to do whatever I want. And that's kind of how it works. Some days better than others, some days not as good as others, And he also says, let's have a little fun. If money was not a factor and safety was not an issue, where in the world of places would you like to travel and stay for 8 days on each top 3? Japan for sure. My family is from New York, and the culture of New York is kind of similar. I watch a lot of these street view videos of people who have the GoPros or whatever it is, chest cameras, and they walk around streets. And when I do look at ones that are Tokyo and Japan, super cool. I would have to go there. Also love I love the food. I would have to eat the food, get in the culture. That would be amazing. Somewhere with a beach, maybe Costa Rica, something like that. And then the third one is kind of hard. I don't really know. Somewhere with really good mountains mountains, maybe like in Africa, something like that, just to see like different species of wildlife, what the environment looks like. So the first two locked in for sure. The third one I would probably have to put some real consideration into. Sean Hartman, UL2QK, who's been around here since the beginning, one of my first subscribers. I really do appreciate you sticking around so long. He says, how tall are you? Not to be heightist, but I refuse to watch videos created by anyone 9 feet or taller. So I know I was joking around in replies to this comment, but you will be surprised. I'm not 9 feet tall. I am around 6 feet. I think maybe 5'11", 5'11 and 3/4. It's something like that, between 5'11 and 6 foot. So, you know, I'm not like short, but I'm also not like super tall. I wanted to go to the NBA until I was like 16 and like 5'8". And I was like, yeah, this isn't going to happen, or 14 or whatever. Cause then I hit puberty and I grew a little bit. And then now I have not grown since I was like 17 or 18. I don't know how to pronounce this person's name, Zbith or something like that. How many immigrants is too many? I don't have like a set amount. I just don't think that immigration is a bad thing. I think at the point that historically we've seen more economic growth when we have more immigrants, when immigrants being added into the workforce, even undocumented immigrants, only raise wages for US born workers. They keep multiple sectors prices down, like in agriculture, undocumented immigrants labor, which by the way, I'm all for them just getting paid their fair share. But like even to look at it from like someone else's angle in terms of wanting to keep prices lower, the labor of undocumented immigrants in multiple sectors is what allows that to happen. Immigrants also pay massively more so than billionaires and corporations into things like Social Security and Medicare. Yes, even undocumented immigrants through ITINs or ITINs, even when they don't have SSNs. So they're massively beneficial to our economy. My perspective would be open borders, let them flow in. If it becomes a problem in terms of it starts affecting us economically, we go from there. But people will look at our crossings now and they're just like, we have to stop this. And we don't. We see a lot of economic growth from it. They're not taking homes. They're not creating or doing crime at larger levels than US born citizens. So I don't think that like tens of thousands is an issue. I don't know if going up, like I would say go up until we find a problem. And then we go from there. I think that's like trying to pretend something's a problem or being paranoid that something might become a problem when it pertains to like human rights is a bit sketchy. Zach Brooks, 3897 says, socialism, really? Still? Let me guess. If we only try your particular brand of socialism, it would work this time. Am I right? I'm pretty sure I know everything about you I need to know. There is nothing you have to say that has any value to anyone, especially not the 130 million or so people who have died brutally as a result of the promises of a socialist utopia, which he put in the SpongeBob letters because he probably thinks that takes his comment from being lazy to like efficient. My question that I would pose back to him, right? Because this is always like the hypocrisy you see in these statements is every death in America to blame for capitalism? Is every starvation death? Are the homeless people dying on the streets? Are the people dying because they can't access medical or Medicare or their medical services because they can't cost it because the free market pushes prices up? Are these deaths as a result of capitalism? Because people are quick to say all the deaths in a socialist country, which there's never been a truly socialist country. So what he means is communism. But in a communist country, all the deaths are as a result of communism. But in capitalism, people die because they need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps or something stupid like that. I would also like to pose, like, what about communism, right? Communal ownership of the means of production kills people. Because a lot of people also conflate communism with politics when communism is economic organization and social structure of power. Same thing with socialism. Communism is just a vehicle in which socialism can be produced, right? Or can be done or inhibited. But socialism in itself is an ideology, and it's just about socializing the power of a market to those within the market rather than allowing private capital to own the market, which is capitalism. And that's something that I believe in full force. I think that if you're working at a company, people who fucking paid $1 million to own 1,000 stocks shouldn't be the one making the decision of the company. When you're the one working, how many people have been at a job and they're like, they notice that something isn't working well and they're like, man, I need to go to my boss and tell him this. And you go to your boss and you're like, hey, I think this would be better if we did it like this. And your boss, who literally is just a fat cat smoking a cigar, sitting back in his office, never does the job, is like, nah, we're going to do it my way. And it's just much less efficient, right? I think that people who have a direct hand in the means of production should have a say or somewhat control over means of production. Now, we could do do a whole socialist video. I could go on for 20 minutes about socialism, but I think that this is one of the most misinformed talking points that people have, especially when they won't even extend that same logic to capitalism. Like people who die under capitalism, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It's your fault. But if you die under communism, it's all because of communism. I wonder why they believe that in a capitalist country. Let's just leave it there. Next is Smoker Do 1966, and he asked, is Biden's border measure going to quit making America great again? I assume that's what he means. Like, I don't know if he means it's going to make MAGA quit or what exactly. I think that it's all right. When he first came out with the border measure, I kind of went pretty hard against it. A lot of it because he used some of the titles that Trump used to enact his Muslim ban, and also because he gave the president unilateral power to shut down the border if he deems the crossings are too much, which are two things I'm very much against. I am a strong supporter of something that is international law and protected under U.S. law, which is the right to asylum claims. And again, I think that immigration is beneficial. Biden seems to want to push immigration towards legal points of entry, which is cool. But I think when you talk about limiting people's rights or upping the standard of asylum claims and just being able to outright deny justified claims is where you kind of get into murky waters. Dark Nodus 666 asked, how many headbands do you own? I own a lot. I own this one. I tried to gather some of them. I couldn't find a bunch. There's like all of these. I probably own like 15 or 20 altogether. I have like the base colors, and I think I have like 2 of most of the base colors. And I have like this tie-dye one, the other tie-dye one I wear a lot. I actually have 2 tie-dye ones right here. I have like a camo one, other like floral decorations. So I have a lot, just too many to count. Okay, so now we're on to the spicy ones, some hate comments, the ones they don't want you to see. We're just gonna debunk these real quick and go through them. Kevster, whatever your name is, says, shut up, you political chump. Shut up, you political chump! You support KKK Hillary, an apartheid Joe crime bill that destroyed an entire generation of black families and cursed Trump's First Step Act that reunited black families that super KKK Hillary and apartheid Joe Biden tried to destroy, all because you're scared. Apartheid Joe will claim that you aren't black if you don't kiss his butt. This BS verdict will only increase Trump supporters. No one showed up when apartheid held a rally in the hood. No one likes you. I'll tell you what, if you don't like me, then you ain't black. Apartheid Joe Biden. Few things to address in this incredibly stupid comment. First off, fuck Hillary Clinton. I don't like either of the Clintons. I don't like Bill Clinton. I don't like Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is also one of the most unlikable candidates of all time, and she beat the shit out of the convicted felon by 3 million votes. She got 3 million and more votes than Donald Trump. Keep that in mind when you're like calling her KKK Hillary. That is someone who can get more votes than Donald Trump. He barely squeaked out the Electoral College win against her by 77,000 votes spread out among 3 colleges. The Electoral College is DEI for Republicans. It's the only way they can win any election on that level. I digress. We're not going to turn it into that. About the Joe Biden crime bill, the crime bill was a miss because of ignorance as to how systemic racism is applied, which I think it's funny when people bring up the crime bill because it's always the same people who will say that systemic racism isn't real. But then they'll be like, Joe Biden created the crime bill that's so racist. And it's like, what do you guys think was in the crime bill? Do you think that it was just like arrest black people, take black people to jail? Because that's not what was in the crime bill. It made the transfer or the sale of weapons a federal crime. It upped felonies for more drug crimes and gave police more power to enact this stuff, which again was a miss because of systemic racism, because of police bias in who they're going to arrest and judicial bias in sentencing. That is what made it wrong and a miss. So if you're saying it's racist, racism came from the bill at the level of the police and the judicial system. It only highlighted the pre-existing systemic racism that was already a problem. But the bill wasn't just like arrest black people, which is what like these kind of dumbasses act like it said in the bill. That's like, it's all Joe Biden's fault. Like, no, he missed because he didn't understand systemic racism. And to that respect, he's changed a lot since then. He's done so much criminal justice reform as opposed to Donald Trump, who did the First Step Act, which, by the way, all legal experts literally say that it was 2 steps backwards instead of 1 step forward. It was largely meaningless, just like what he signed about the VA, where Obama did massive VA reform, and then Trump sign like a little legislation and then try to take credit for all the reform, even though by all aspects, his reform did nothing. Now, Biden has actually stepped in and done real criminal justice reform. He's put actual people of color at head of these things rather than Donald Trump, who put Ben Carson in the head of housing and then tried to roll back fair lending laws to black people, things like that. So yeah, I think that's actual racism. And then when it comes to Joe Biden saying, if you don't like me, you aren't black, that was stupid. That was a terrible miss. I don't know exactly. Like, he was just trying to say, like, you know, you can't be like, how are you going to vote for a racist or whatever? And like, he's old. I think he was showing like his age, but people who say that something like that is racist also don't understand what racism is. Like, just mentioning a skin color isn't racism. Saying things like, I have 91 criminal charges, so now black voters will relate to me more. That's racist. And that's something that Donald Trump said. When you say he stutters sometimes, it tells the rest of you are a complete idiot. Learn to type before you call someone an idiot, first off. He's a dementia patient at best. I guess it's a prerequisite to be a Democrat. I'll take the felon with some balls. Okay, so people who say this have never met a dementia patient. I'm just going to say it as someone who's worked with dementia patients, who's worked in a dementia ward. Like, the fact that you think Joe Biden could go up first off and give a speech like the State of the Union, like the January 6th address, that he could go and win the debates against Trump in 2020 by all polling, and he can actually form sentences. By the way, I know it's surprising. His D-Day speech, if you ever watch him talk, like, yeah, he stutters sometimes. Yes, he shows his age. Guess what? So does Donald Trump. But if you think that that is dementia, I urge you to meet someone with dementia, because you all sound really, really stupid when you say the man who can care for himself, can do presidential duties, has created more jobs than Donald Trump. We've seen more economic growth than Donald Trump. We have wages outpacing inflation. He's brought inflation down 6%. That man has dementia. Touch grass, please. Okay, this is Fly Yogi, who posted a comment on my Caitlin Clark video. Dude, did you eat a bowl of stupid? When a moron says the only reason you are popular is because you're white, that's effing racism. Never mind that it's one of the top black players saying that crap. Your arrogant stupidity exposes your ignorance. Shaking my head, pitiful and pathetic. Pro tip, stop listening to that voice in your head. It belongs to a fool. And this is again where it's like, it kind of gets scary because these people just genuinely don't understand what racism is. Mentioning someone's race is not racist. I'm just saying. Are WNBA players jealous of Caitlin Clark? Yes. As any veteran players are in sports across the league, are generally jealous of rookies who come in with all the eyes, with all the deals. They see green. They don't see white. And again, saying because mentioning someone's race alone is not racism. Saying things like, that person's only a doctor. This black person is only a doctor because of DEI, and they would never be a doctor without it because black people are less qualified inherently to be doctors. That's racist. Saying someone's popular because of their race is not racist. I don't know like what extent these people need to learn what racism is. It's also funny that there's literally the whole Republican right-wing thing is racism isn't real. But now that a white person is getting bullied, it's definitely racism. Like, no. And as I point out in the video, if you haven't watched it, go check it out. Tiger Woods won the Masters in his like first year as a golfer. I don't know if they consider him a rookie or whatever they call it in golfing. And they were literally making comments at the Masters like, oh, now we'll have to serve collard greens and fried chicken at the next one. That's racist. LeBron James came into the NBA and his own Cavaliers teammates were like, he's not going to do shit. He's not going to help us. He's not going to do all this. That's not racist. But again, he's black. Like, are you guys going to call that racist? Like, no, they would say it's not racism because he's black. But again, it's just this weird like white savior complex that white people have. You saw it with Eminem and rap music. I swear to God, it's like you can't hate on white people in black spaces without white people coming to their rescue. And it's weird. And it just shows like the misunderstanding of what racism actually looks like. This person, Lane Johnson, 7656 said, there's a huge difference between things like roads and socialist idiocy like government healthcare. Yeah, because again, Providing everyone health care, that's communism, guys. You know what I mean? How stupid are you that you think everyone should have health care? There's no difference. You use public roads. Everybody pitches in money to pay for those roads. Even people who don't have jobs aren't just not allowed to use the roads. I know it's shocking, right? But if you're unemployed, if you're homeless, you can still use the roads. Who pays for those roads? People who work. Government healthcare works the same way. By the way, quick rundown on how insurance works. Private insurances take all the money for everyone who has that private insurance. They put it into a pool, and then they have you through pay levels. You can access a certain amount of that money for certain amounts of care that you want. That is very inefficient. There would be more money in the pool, more services for everyone to access if instead of having small little pools here and here meant to garner as much profit as possible, everyone just paid into one large pool that anyone who needed it could pull from. That would be the most efficient way to do healthcare, but it's socialism, right? But roads aren't. Okay, guys, those are all the ones we had to run through. Again, I appreciate you so much for 10,000 subscribers. We're going to keep chugging along. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you watched it and you aren't subscribed, consider hitting the subscribe button. And until next time,